Hey guys. So I'm going to be a rebel today. Okay? I'm breaking the pattern here. What? I think there's a cause. I think I'm a rebel with a cause. A good enough cause, we'll see. But today in our Transformed Sermon series, we were supposed to look at the conversion of the Apostle Paul, but I did that already at our inaugural service like a month and a half ago. So, I'm ahead of the curve. They need to keep up with where I'm at. So I'm actually going to divert from the plan a little bit, but it still fits this theme of being transformed. But we're going to jump out of the book of Acts, and we're going to look at a story in Mark 5. And it really fits this transformed theme because it's a story of a man who was one way before he met Jesus, and then after he met Jesus, he was a totally different person. And it's a story that reminds us that Jesus frees us from oppression. And since we're in this season of Juneteenth and 4th of July, Independence Day, I just thought it would be appropriate to talk a little bit about freedom. Let's read Mark 5, verses 1 through 5 to begin here. It says, "They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones." I mean, it's just a heartbreaking picture. I don't know if I could kind of describe a farther place to sink to. He's the epitome of hitting rock bottom. And these dark demonic forces had started to control his life to such a degree where he was just physically, emotionally, socially in such a bad spot. And socially, he was clearly rejected because he's living in tombs, and wandering around in hills all by himself. And just think about, from a physical point of view, living in that unsanitary place among dead bodies. And what we'll see later in verse 15, he had no clothes, and what we're seeing here of cutting and stuff, he had open wounds, he's in a really bad spot physically. And unsurprisingly, this continual lack of safety that he was experiencing and having to deal with being subjected to this evil force that was within him, we shouldn't be surprised to see him so emotionally distressed. He's crying out day and night, just ceaselessly out into the night. He's never stopping wailing because of the distress that he's in. So what caused him to be like this? How did he get there? The story doesn't tell us. We actually do not know, and it would be totally just a matter of pure speculation to start to guess as to whether or not there was any sin, anything that he had done, whether he had been deserving of this fate in one way or another. We have no idea, but what we do know is that the man had lost control of himself entirely and had become a captive in his own body. And he wasn't a captive because he was chained up, and it's not as if he was bound. The story tells us that they tried to tie him up, but he would keep breaking out of it. Those chains, those restraints couldn't hold him. He was a slave, actually, because he had no restraint. And his impulses made him a danger to himself and to anybody else around him. So Daniel Webster, he's a U.S. politician from the 1800s. You heard of him, right? Yeah, everyone knows that guy. He was once quoted in saying this: "Liberty exists in proportion to wholesome restraint." I think that's really good, actually. In other words, freedom without boundaries and discipline is an illusion. History has shown us that when we don't have godly limits in our lives, we end up either infringing on the rights and freedoms of other people, or at the very least, our character gets so corrupted that we become slaves to ourselves, our own hearts, our own minds, our own behaviors, our own patterns that trap us, enslave us. I mentioned Juneteenth earlier, and it's a holiday with complex feelings because of what it represents. I think it's far under-celebrated. I had only heard about it maybe 5 years ago, which I think is just so sad. I wish I had heard of it much earlier. And it's also complex because of the story that it tells, right? That we would even have to celebrate something that has to do with slavery. It has to do with people treating each other that way, and it's a stain on our history as a country. And here's the thing. If society at large were to actually take up the wholesome restraints that are built into discipleship to Jesus, the idea of enslaving a human being, let alone a whole people group, would be unthinkable. The idea that this could come about, and sadly, that people would even use the Bible, that people would say, from a Christian standpoint, okay, that was supporting of something like slavery is abhorrent to God. And in many ways, we have Christian abolitionists to thank for taking this matter seriously and really championing seeing slavery overthrown. And it wasn't just Christian abolitionists. There were plenty of abolitionists who were not Christian, but even if they didn't realize it, they were still working off of a framework, certain values and principles that ultimately tie back to Jesus. So Christian or not, Jesus is totally interwoven with the overthrowing of slavery. And that we were sadly, obviously, as I will express in a second, slavery is not over and done with. The slavery that we're talking about, we're understanding when we talk about American history, sure, but human trafficking is still a thing. We still see people being enslaved by other people, mistreated by other people, and it's just heartbreaking. And we all know today, or we should, I hope, that slavery is bad. We all know that. Everyone knows slavery is bad, and that is a big deal. Like I said, human trafficking still exists, and if we had the opportunity, if someone showed up, that we had a partnership maybe with an organization that was fighting human trafficking, I know everyone in this room would stand up and do something about it with great conviction because we know that it's such a serious issue, and we don't want to see anyone subjected to that for any reason. But do we take slavery to sin as seriously? Right? We think about the physical bonds of slavery, and that's a big deal. We all know that's bad. But when it comes to being enslaved to sin, do we take it as seriously? John 8:31 through 34 says, Jesus said to the people who believed in him, "You are truly my disciples, and if you remain faithful to my teachings, you are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." But we are descendants of Abraham, they said. We have never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean you will be set free? Jesus replied, I tell you the truth. Everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Thing is, slavery to sin is just as serious a form of slavery as physical captivity. It's just as serious. And in fact, in some ways, it's more serious because of its eternal implications when we don't deal with the sin in our lives, the ways that it keeps us down, where it keeps us captive. And yet, so often people will minimize it, dismiss it, not even recognize that they're in the middle of it at times. They don't see the prison they're in. Harriet Tubman, we're going to talk about her a little bit today. Harriet Tubman, the famous former slave who turned into a conductor for the Underground Railroad and was responsible for helping save hundreds of people from their captivity, recounted how difficult it was to try and rescue slaves who, as she said, didn't know they were slaves. She would go to these places with people who were in generational slavery, trying to rescue them, trying to bring them out and bring them north. But so many of them didn't understand the situation that they were in because they didn't know any better. They never knew any other kind of life than the captivity that they were born into. And so many of them didn't want to leave. And many of them knew what they were in and didn't want to leave because they were just afraid of it. But it's crazy to think that some people from what she's expressing, didn't actually even recognize what they were in the middle of. What they were being subjected to wasn't normal. But their experiences and probably no little amount of brainwashing convinced them that what they were experiencing was totally normal. And so fully in the middle of all that tragedy, all of that trauma, all of the terrible things that human beings can do to one another, they thought, well, this is how it is. This is how life is for us. It's unbelievable. It's super tragic. But we can have the same kind of disposition to our sin, can't we? Our addictions, our dysfunction, despite the harm that they inflict on us, we look around and we see other people the same way, going through some of the same types of things and think, well, that's just normal. That's just life. And that's part of what Jesus is here to help us see, that slavery to sin isn't normal. It is not God's plan. So have you ever felt trapped by something in your life? Something that you're trying to shake the chains off of you, trying desperately for years. Have you ever had that thing where you're like, I can't get beyond this? Maybe you're stuck in the middle of something today. Maybe this past couple weeks has reminded you all too fully of the slavery, the bondage that sin can bring into your life. And if that's you, thankfully there is hope. The man who is possessed by demons is a mirror reflecting back who we are, right? Creatures enslaved by our impulses, slave to sin. And we have our demons. We're not demon possessed, I hope. That'd be a fun time. Not really. But we have our demons. We have our giants to slay. And unless we accept some outside intervention from a power far greater than our own, we're going to stay that way. Those demons, they're going to park up, they're going to put up shop, and they ain't going anywhere. Those giants we're facing, they're like, okay, we're going to keep squashing you. We need somebody outside of us to deal with our demons. And fortunately, that's where Jesus comes in. Mark 5:6-17 says, when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want from me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send him out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those who tended the pigs ran off and reported this to the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Well, that seems like an odd response, but they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave the region. It's crazy. First thing to point out with this story is that Jesus commands the things that command us. The things that, like, the demons, the sins that we wrestle with, that put us down, that put us under their thumb, that we feel like we can never come out under of, Jesus, Jesus is smacking them down. It's a no contest event. When there's the divine against the demonic, the divine wins every time. The man runs. The spirit, the evil spirits within him, the spirits, legion. We hear that idea of, oh my gosh, like filled with a legion of spirits, running and falling at Jesus' feet, saying, "Please don't torture us, please." Something that we're so afraid of, that we feel like is such an evil, such an enemy, a powerful enemy in our life, encounters Jesus, game over. Falling at his feet, begging, pleading for mercy. Despite all the damage that these demons could do to the man, all they could do in Jesus' presence was to fall down and beg. And in much of the same way, our hardships, our sins, our challenges, our demons, the things we're facing today, they stand no chance against the power of Jesus and have to submit to him. Another thing about this story that I find really inspiring. If you can't tell, I'm really passionate about this story. I really like this story. I was really convicted by this one. Funny enough, I was going to say at the beginning, normally my notes are about 3 pages long. This one almost got to a full 5 pages. So I was like, okay, Holy Spirit, you got some stuff to say. This other thing here, which is really great, is Jesus sees us as highly valuable. Even at our lowest, he will seek us out for our redemption. When Harriet Tubman was a girl, she had been born into slavery. That's all she knew. And she went to a grocery store, presumably to pick up food. And while she was there was an escaped slave that the store owner recognized. And as that runaway slave was trying to flee, the store owner threw a lead weight at the slave, but missed and struck Harriet in the head, cracking her skull. And so for the rest of her life, I didn't know this, but for the rest of her life, she struggled with narcolepsy. Like she would just have these sleeping spells. In the middle of her work, she'd faint. She'd fall over, fall asleep. And because of her sleeping spells, she got on her master's bad side, as you could imagine. Like he's like, I bought this person, I expect them to work, and here they are falling asleep on the job. So she would get an earful, she'd get these beatings, she'd be mistreated, and there was one time she mentioned that her master had told her at one point that you aren't worth a sixpence. It's not a form of currency we have anymore, but that would equate to about 50 cents today. Really? A human being, a soul that God created. You're not worth half a dollar. You're not worth 50 cents to me. Crazy. Crazy that we view each other that way, that we think that way, and we start to believe those lies that Satan puts in our ear, Satan would love nothing more than to make us feel absolutely worthless. Make us totally insecure, make us feel that we're nothing. And the reason why he wants us to feel that way is because it makes us less receptive to Jesus and makes us more susceptible to the kinds of traps, the snares, the things that he wants to trip us up with. And so we need to really push out that voice, that accusatory voice in our head that keeps putting us down from Satan. If there's sometimes your inner voice is telling you like, hey, you need to grow in something, whatever, like that's not what I'm talking about. That's whether that's the conscious Holy Spirit, up for debate. That's perfectly fine that there's a little bit of like, hey, let's grow, let's get better. But you know what I mean? The voice that says you are worth nothing. You're trash. That has ever been Satan. Nothing in that is from God. So if you struggle, if you have those kinds of loathsome thoughts about yourself, just know that is not how God sees you. Never has he seen you that way. We need to see ourselves through the eyes of Jesus. And to Jesus, we're like a bunch of pigs. Oh, well, okay, that's not very encouraging. Let me explain. If you think meat is expensive now, think about how it was back then. It was really a luxury. A herd of 2,000 pigs would represent an enormous amount of wealth. Like the top 1%, consuming this, and particularly having that large of a herd of pigs. With that in mind, let's consider the words of James R. Edwards in his commentary called The Gospel According to Mark. He says, in the eyes of Jesus, the rescue and restoration of one person is more important than vast capital assets. Compared to the redemption of a human being, the loss of the swineherds, considerable though it was, did not rate mentioning. So many people miss this in the story because the story doesn't make that a focal point. It doesn't really point out, and that was a very valuable, thing to see all these pigs run off the edge of a cliff. But the reality is that says something really profound about how God sees us. It brings to mind the scriptures like when Jesus says, "You are worth more than many sparrows." Right? God loves all of his creation. He made it for a reason. But when it comes to you, you're worth more than many pigs. I'll have you know. You are so valuable to God. When Satan wants to say, you're not worth a sixpence, you're not worth 50 cents, God is saying, you're priceless. I can't put a dollar figure on you. And as monetarily valuable as the herds were, the ultimate price for us wasn't pigs. It was something far more valuable. The thing that freed us was Jesus himself. And if we needed as if we needed any other reason to realize how much the God loves us and values us, is sending his own son onto the cross for us. It's unthinkable. Like the possessed man, we experience captivity, so Jesus became a prisoner to set us free. Like the possessed man, we experience rejection, so Jesus became an outcast to bring us into his family. Like the possessed man, we experience harm, so Jesus was wounded to heal us. Like the possessed man, we experience exposure, so Jesus became naked to clothe us and protect us. Like the possessed man, we cry out in despair, so Jesus cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" to turn our mourning into joy. When we become convinced of these truths, when we really key into that in our lives, it changes everything. When we appreciate that reality the way that it deserves, we experience an internal shift within us that sets us free from the patterns that enslave us. It's from the power of Jesus and our appreciation, our faith in what he has done for us, that life can never be the same. We totally change. We find a freedom we never thought was possible because the things we fought so hard against on our own power that we never could overcome, by faith and understanding and appreciation of Jesus, now we're victors. So I actually want to say a word specifically to the kids in the room, but also to anybody who maybe grew up in a Christian home, like in a pretty healthy environment. You might hear these things and be like, okay, well, like, yeah, demon possession and like slavery and like really intense stuff, like how do I relate to that? Well, here's the thing. It's just as valid an example of Jesus' rescuing power to have been freed in advance from the sin and suffering that you've never experienced. Think about that for a second. I know that's a long sentence, but my point is, you don't have to sin it up and suffer a bunch to appreciate God's love for you and his rescuing power. That he, in advance, put you in a family, in a home where it was healthy and safe and had Christian values, and that security is an example of him freeing you from sin. And so we as families, as parents, have a great opportunity to actually pass that along to our kids and say, listen, what a blessing it is to have grown up in this environment. And not to say, because I'm a great parent, I'm awesome, but to grow up in a Christian household where you are protected in advance from so many things that many of your parents or their parents had to wrestle and struggle with for so long. In fact, I think it's even a sweeter blessing to grow up in a good, healthy Christian home. And yet, so many people take it for granted. So I encourage you, kids or anybody who's had that experience of being like, I didn't have it that bad. So then maybe like you don't feel as much affection for God. Don't take it for granted. He saved you. He rescued you from what could have been. I think that's awesome. Having gone to the cross and died in our place, Jesus offers to free us from the sin and brokenness that it produces. But that's not the end of the story. That's only the first part, what God frees us from. He also freed us for something. The scriptures like Galatians 5:13 and 1 Peter 2:16 make it clear that our freedom as Christians isn't just meant for us. It's given to us for a bigger reason. Jesus doesn't only free us from something, he frees us for something. He has a plan. He has a purpose. He wants you to use that freedom for something. Mark 5:18 through 20, just finishing up this story with the demon-possessed man, it says, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. First, he was begging at his feet, don't torture me. Now he's saying, please let me come with you. What a change. But Jesus didn't let him. Oh, that's kind of weird. He doesn't let him come with him? He says, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. This man, formerly demon-possessed man, is the first missionary in the book of Mark. A Gentile, mind you. A formerly demon-possessed, unclean person, mind you. Not who you'd really expect as Jesus' first ambassador. But he says, go. Go and tell people about this. He was clearly not just freed from something, he was freed for something. God had a plan for his life, a purpose for what he could accomplish in his name, and the same is true for us today. But the calling we receive is seldom free, or seldom pain-free, seldom easy. It is often a difficult thing to take up. To take up our cross, to deny ourselves, to be a disciple of Jesus is not easy. Remember the whole valuable pig herd thing that we were just talking about? Well, when they plummeted off a cliff because Jesus was saving this guy from demon possession, some poor innocent person or people had to pay for it. like innocent bystanders. People who had nothing to do with it, were not the beneficiaries of his miracle, had to take up the burden of that financial hit. And that's why they're like, they beg him, like, please leave. Like, stop. Which is so tragic. Because instead of celebrating the transformation, the liberation, the freedom that man experienced with him, rejoicing with him, seeing what he had once been and seeing what he became, they instead got caught up in what they lost. The hit that they took. And they begged Jesus to go. Please, go. How often do people do that? Say to Jesus, it's too much. Please leave. So, there's a natural question for us then. What price are you willing to pay for the sake of somebody else's freedom? When you are not the person God is currently directly blessing, you're not the person receiving the miracle, but it's costing you time, energy, resources, fill in the blank. How do you feel about that? Like Paul says in 2 Corinthians 12:15, will you gladly spend and be spent for the sake of somebody else's soul? I mean, the standard that Paul set of the suffering he went through, how he spent and spent his stuff, but spent himself, the suffering he subjected himself to that he chose for the sake of other people. And mind you, oftentimes people who did not appreciate him very much. But he gave his life for it. Literally, eventually actually died for it. But he had people had attempted to kill him a few times, actually, stoning him, but him surviving it. Crazy. But that standard, because he's just doing what Jesus did. He's like, Jesus did this for me, I'm going to do this for other people. And we talk about Jesus' sacrifice, we talk about his death, but how much do we actually appreciate or understand, especially in today's society? We're not experiencing a lot of the same kinds of persecutions and hardships in our faith that they had to back then, or where people do, quite frankly, in other places of the world still to this day. We can get out of touch with this idea of like, what does it mean to die for someone? Give up my life for Jesus and somebody else. It is a high calling. So put yourself into the shoes of Harriet Tubman again. You've just made the treacherous journey through the woods and marshes of Maryland. You've gone up the Choptank River through Delaware. You crossed the Mason-Dixon line, and here you are in Pennsylvania. You're finally, she was about 30 years old, just maybe shy of that at the time. Finally, after 3 decades of your life, free. Finally. She could have so easily said, I'm out, I'm going to Canada. Forget all you guys. This has been good, not really, but I'm out. But what did she do? She went back in for the sake of others. And at the time, mind you, where at that same year, the same year she escaped, they passed what's called the Fugitive Slave Act, where people were being incentivized to go into the North to find people who were escaped slaves and bring them back to their captors. And she's like, I'm going to go back in? That's crazy. That's wild. It's Christian. It's just like Jesus. Crazy. Wild. She's out of her mind. But the thing is, she could not just sit back and enjoy her freedom while other people, her family members and other people who were just like her, were going through the hell that she just got out of. And so she went back in. She decided to get up and do something about it. She used her freedom for something bigger than herself. And that is what our freedom is for. We're freed from something, but we're also freed for something, and for God and for other people. But again, it's not easy. When Harriet was asked about her decision to go back in, to put her own neck on the line, to risk it all, she said this, "The Lord told me to do this. I said, oh Lord, I can't. Don't ask me, take somebody else." Pretty natural response, I think, to being in that situation. Please don't take me. I get it. That's probably what any of us would say. She was referred to, still is called to this day, the Moses to her people, because of the way that she had emulated the heart of Moses in bringing her people out of slavery. But we also see in this story a little bit of Moses too, don't we? Exodus 3:11 through 12a says, Moses protested to God. God had said, go free my people. Take them out of the clutches of the Pharaoh. Take them out of Egypt into the promised land. And Moses protested. So human. Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people out of Israel, or people of Israel out of Egypt? God answered, I will be with you. When Moses was faced with his daunting task and these feelings of inadequacy, like, who am I? Who am I to go to the leader of this nation and demand the release of all these people? He's filled with fear, anxiety, feelings of insecurity, of inadequacy. God's response to him is really interesting. He doesn't say, well, you're the bomb. You're the man. You can do it. You're awesome. I believe in you. Believe in yourself. Which our culture really likes to, like, that's our answer to everything. You good? You get it, girl? You go, girl. You got it. That was not God's response. No, that is not what he said. He said, I will be with you. The solution for Moses and the solution for us today when we're faced with fear and insecurity is the presence of the living God. Him going with us. I will not leave you alone. I will be right by your side every step of the way. And it's interesting because we look at the story with the demon-possessed man, right? And he's begging to go with Jesus. And he says, no, go to your people. And you would assume, okay, so he's not with Jesus because he's not physically going with him. Well, that makes me think of the Great Commission where Jesus was going into heaven. But what were his last words to his disciples when he sent them out on their mission? And I will be with you always. To the very end of the age. Always. Even when I'm not physically there with you, I am just as much with you. I am just as present when it's my spirit. That had better be really convicting to us today. I don't know how many times I have said, man, I wish Jesus was here. I wish he'd be here, right here. If he was just here, he'd fix it. If he was just here with me, all this would go away. He'd fix it. But he is. He is here. Jesus is here. And we have to believe him. We have to believe him. He is here with us. Everything that we're setting out to do, everything he's freed you from and freed you for, he's not leaving you to do it alone. He's not like, here's some page, words on pages on a book that's dead. It's like, read this, instruction manual, figure it out. That's not how it is with Jesus. He is here, now, with us. Always has been, always will be. The Spirit of the living God. That's crazy. That's crazy. Thing is, we are never up to the task on our own. I can't do it. Even this week, my kids, it's so lame to say because, I'm talking about, real stuff here. And now here I'm like, man, my kids wouldn't sleep this week. So we're literally, Elise and I were talking before I'm on my way here. And she's like, and I'm like, man, how is this going to work when I get back in school? I be quite honest, I'm trying not to make a habit of this. I was up until about 5:30 last night, finishing this. Because my normal slot of time to work on my sermons, I literally prayed. I was like, God, please give me the strength, and energy to do this. And he answered that prayer. I actually feel pretty good. After this, I'm going to crash real hard. I'm going to take a nap, for real. You better believe it. But, kids are sick again. They're not sleeping. We're exhausted. I'm like, God save me. Help me do the things that I need to do. And you know what he's teaching me? Is you can't do this on your own. You need me. And it's a hard lesson to learn. It's really hard. I don't like it. I don't think you do either. You don't like it. Don't act like you do. But it's such an important lesson to learn. He's with you. Right there. His power. Always readily available to you. If you'll embrace him. Rather than Energizer bunny, keep pushing, then I'll do it. We crash, we burn, we cannot do it. We need God. When God is with us, suddenly all things are possible. Exodus 3:13 through 14. But Moses protested again. Again, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. It's all well and good to say God is with you, but what is he like? What can he do? In the middle of Moses' fear and insecurity, God spoke his name. I am. And what this means for us, part of what this means for us, scholars would debate, there's all kinds of theology. What does that mean, I am? But I think this is really crucial, a key thing to not miss out on what God is saying here to Moses and to us. When our thoughts begin to oppose us and say, I'm not ready for this, God says, that's okay, I am. When our thoughts say, I'm not much of a leader, God says, I am. When our thoughts say, I'm not the best person for the job, God says, I am. I'm not smart enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not good enough. God says to you, I am. If you ever feel that way, you're not good enough. The reality of that, it in some ways is true. We're not. We can't. Like I said, but when God is with us, because of who he is, we now can. When you're not enough, God is. Always was, always is, always will be. When the accusing voice in your head tries to keep you from the promises God has freed you for, the purposes he has in mind for you, and that voice tries to remind you of everything that you are not, God is saying, don't worry, I am. The purpose we're freed for will undoubtedly lead us to do things that we don't want to do, that aren't easy. We will protest. God, please, no, anything but that. Anyone but me. We will protest. It'll cost us time. It'll cost us resources. And it'll mean that we have to deny ourselves. We have to let go of some of our desires. But how could we do any less for the God who gave his all for us? If you're in the middle of spiritual captivity, the key to your cage is not one made of stainless steel. It's made of blemishless blood. The cost that Jesus paid, his body broken, his blood spilt to free you from your cages, from your captivity, from your oppression, from your slavery. The price was him. The price was Jesus. Because of his death, you have the opportunity today to be set free from the things that are killing you. He died so we could live. And for those of you who have already found that freedom in Jesus, remember how he delivered you. Think of the things you were able to overcome or avoid altogether by his power, by his love, by his hand. And in appreciation to what he's done, pay it forward. Don't settle for what you've been freed from and say, well, that's good enough. Live into what you've been freed for. Live into it. Who around you is locked up, held captive by Satan in a dark room where sin has its nasty tentacles all over them? Who do you see struggling? Who do you see in captivity? Who can you help? What can you do to help step into that dark room, to break in the light of Jesus into that person's life, to set them free? It may be as simple as opening up your home for hospitality, like once or twice a month. I'm telling you, that is really powerful, especially if all of us did that. It makes an impact. It it helps set people free. I mean, even like what Vernice was talking about, stepping into a loving community. Thank you so much again for sharing, Vernice. It's awesome. To step into a community who's showing you that love and appreciation, that hospitality, that warmth that they're not accustomed to because the world is so dark and bleak and hurtful. Despite all of its best efforts to be loving and kind, and there are loving and kind people out there who aren't Christians, I'm not trying to say that only Christians are. If they happen to resemble those things, they're still from Jesus. But for us to be that special community that's safe, that is secure, that is warm, that is welcoming, that is hospitable, that brings people in, that says, I'm willing to sacrifice that Friday night once a month or every other week to have somebody over and impact them for Christ. That pays out huge dividends. It can. Even if we don't believe it, it really can. It could look like getting involved in an organization or social club. Maybe that has a godly purpose, or maybe it's just to be around and to meet people, to be in a space, putting yourself in a spot where you can start meeting and influencing people and impacting them for Jesus. It might be things that you already like doing. If you like sports, go and do sports with people. If you like board games, go and do board games with people. If you like movies, go and see movies with people. Get with people. Do the things you already like. Just be around people. Be a Christian in those environments. It takes some effort. It takes some willingness to get out of our homes, our comfort zones, our places where we're really secure. We already talked about, we bought a house across the street. Our intention is to bring people into our home, but it's a really nice house. And it could be really tempting to be like, I like my couch. I'm going to stay right here. Be really easy. Especially when I've only gotten 2 hours of sleep tonight. I'm going to stay on this couch. Don't let your homes be a different kind of cage. Welcome people in and get out there. You were freed for that purpose of being in other people's lives and winning them for Jesus. Or maybe, just maybe, God might send you across the world to learn a different language, to learn a new culture, to become like, I don't want to be so possessive of all y'all because I love you guys and this is such a great community. And I'm like, I want everybody to stay here with me. It's my community. Like, if God is calling you to Timbuktu, anywhere, you might just be the person to break new ground in a new place in the world and make a difference there. And if that's what God's calling you to, do not let me stop you. Don't stay here. Get out. Go do what God's calling you to do. And that's not going to be for everybody. Not everybody has to be a world missionary. You can be a missionary in your backyard. But I don't think a lot of the people that Jesus or God or Jesus called to do that kind of work in the Bible were really excited about going to all these different countries and doing all this work. They probably would have rather just stayed in their own backyard. But God calls sometimes, and if that's the case, we got to answer. We were freed for His purposes. Whatever it looks like, the point is that God freed you for your own good, but also for the good of others. It's not just for you. The full and purposeful life that God gives us is awesome. I just want to say that. It's hard sometimes. It's a lot of work. It ain't easy. But it's awesome. The life that we get, the life of meaning, the life of purpose, the life of fulfillment that comes through Christ is awesome. And it's all possible because Jesus frees us. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we're going to sing our final song. Father God, the living, active, powerful God that we love and serve, and we bow before you. Thank you for being a liberator. Thank you for throwing off the chains, the yokes that oppress us, the sin that so easily entangles. Thank you for clothing us, replacing those chains with a robe, with a ring, with an inheritance. Literally, the blood of your Son. You freed us from so much, God, but we know that you freed us for something. And I can't even speak to what these people have been freed for, God, but you know, and you are here, and you want them to do those things, and you will walk beside them to do those things every single day of their lives, God. Remind us of that. Convince us of that. Build our conviction that we trust that you, the living God, Spirit of God, is here among us, working through us, working powerfully, has been always and will continue to, and we need to grab a hold of you. We need to ride your current. We need to ride your wave and see amazing things happen, God, because we don't want to just do churchianity. We don't want to just show up and hang out with people. Hang out with people is awesome, God, but you have such bigger purposes and plans. And we could do that while we hang out with people, while we do this together as a community. God, help us to be the kind of community that lives into your purposes for us. A community that serves, that's known in our community for serving, that loves people, that serves, that the sacrifices for people, is willing to put ourselves out there, isn't content with simply going through the motions. Make us more like your Son. That's what I'm asking. Make us more like Jesus, who didn't come to be served, but to serve. Thank you for him. Thank you for his example. Thank you for his power. Thank you for what he's done in our lives. Thank you for what he will continue to do. Thank you for the ways that you free us. Pray this in your Son's name. Amen.